Chapter 3, Lesson 5, Adding and Subtracting Like Fractions. All right, the first thing we're going to look at is the definition of like fractions. And all that means is two fractions, or more, with the same denominator. So 3 over 5 and 2 over 5 are like fractions. All right, now if we're going to add or subtract like fractions, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add or subtract their numerators, whatever our sign tells us to do. We're going to keep the same denominator, and then we're going to simplify. Now, something really important to remember is that when we are evaluating, when we're adding or subtracting, the negatives go with the numerator. So we think about our addition, and those negatives we think about with our numerator, but in the answer, that negative needs to come out of the numerator and go with the entire fraction if our answer is going to be a negative number. Let's look at some examples. So my first one, I have 5/8 plus negative 7/8. So I'm going to add my numerators. So I'm going to say 5 plus, and I'm going to use this negative with my numerator. 5 plus negative 7 is negative 2. I'm going to keep my denominator the same, and now I'm going to simplify. I'm going to say I can divide them both by 2. I get 1 over 4, and it's not going to be a negative 1, it's going to be a negative 1/4. My negative now goes with the entire fraction. All right, down below I have 3/10 minus 9/10. So I say 3 minus 9, I subtract my numerators, that gives me a negative 6, keep my denominator, and now I simplify, and I say it's 3 over 5, negative. So it's a negative 3/5. My negative does not stay in my numerator for my final answer. All right, when we add mixed numbers, first thing we want to do is add the two whole numbers together. Then we want to add the fraction part, and then we'll simplify our answer. Now again, these negatives are going to cause us some problems. So very important to remember down here. When we have negatives, change the mixed numbers to improper fractions first. It's going to be very, very helpful for you on certain problems. And it's just easier to say when I have negatives and I'm adding mixed numbers, change them to improper. So now, when we are adding and I have all positives, I'm just going to add. So I'm going to add my whole numbers. 2 plus 3, which gives me 5. And then I'm going to add my fraction part, 5/6 plus 5/6. Add my numerators, keep the same denominator. But now my problem is this is not an appropriate way to write my answer. So I'm going to say, okay, this 10/6 right here, I can also think about that as 1 and 4/6. So I still have these 5, but then I'm going to combine that with the 10/6 or with the 1 and 4/6 and make 6 and 4/6, which then I simplify to get 6 and 2/3. Okay, another example now. Let's look at what happens when we're adding with negatives. So I'm adding with negatives. I'm going to want to be safe and change them to improper fractions. So I'm going to make 3 and 4/5 be 19/5 plus negative 21/5. So 19 plus negative 21 is negative 2 over 5, and I'm going to rewrite that my whole fraction is negative 2/5. All right, when we subtract mixed numbers, the first thing I want to do is change them to improper. Some problems I can do without changing them, but it's the safest way to do subtraction problems, especially now that we're dealing with negatives. And then I do the same thing, subtract my numerators, keep the denominator, and simplify, simplify, simplify. Let's look at some examples. 3 and 1/4 minus 1 and 3/4. I'm going to change to improper fractions, and then I'm ready to subtract. Subtract my numerators, keep my denominators, and simplify. I can leave it as 3/2, or I can change it to 1 and 1/2. All right, negative 9 and 3/8 minus 5 and 5/8. First thing, change to improper. So I have 75 over 8 minus 45 over 8. And I can think about it as like zoom, zoom, So I have negative 75 plus negative 45, which is negative 120 over 8. And then I see that I can divide them both by 4, and I can get negative 30 over 2. I can divide them by 2 again, and I get negative 15. All right, the last thing we're going to look at is adding and subtracting algebraic fractions. Same idea. Add or subtract your numerators, keep the same denominator, and simplify your answer. All right, so let's look at some examples. 2a over 10 plus 4a over 10. Add my numerators. 2a plus 4a will give me 6a over 10. I can simplify by doing 6 and 10 divided by 2, which would give me 3a over 5. Okay? And down below, 3x over 8 minus 5x over 8. 3x minus 5x is negative 2x over 8. My whole fraction is negative. And I can simplify it, and it makes 1x over 4. But then a better way to write that is to just put negative x over 4.